Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by the wonderful, the lovely, the effervescent, I got the name here, Mercedes Kostucky. Now,
Yes.
this is a very interesting, how this kind of came together was very interesting. It's been very at the last moment. Um, As everybody knows, I've worked for a long, long time with Dan Sanderson over at Planksip in Canada, and we randomly had a very long conversation last Thursday night, which was awkward because I had been working all day and he wanted to talk, and I was kind of like, I want to be off the phone. And he recommended that we have them on to talk about their life, work, and career. They are a writer. There's so many publications. They have a whole thing going with fine dining. We'll get into that in a minute. And also a lot of really wonderful stuff about entrepreneurship, life coaching, and all this sort of thing. So we're going to start with some interesting writing that they've done, and then we'll dive into the rest of the chat. So welcome, Mercedes, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you so much, Cameron, for taking the time and for having this conversation on such short notice.
No, no, I appreciate it. It's I laughed that I had one appointment today and in the course of a few phone calls ended up with three and I have a news hour to do. So I'm excited. Why don't we dive into the chat starting by why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what you do and why you do it, and we'll go from there.
So I'm a creator, an entrepreneur, a coach. I help people create transformation magic out of what they do, create mastery. And I myself go out and create as much fun and exciting things as I can. I was born in Belgium, Polish Jewish family. I live and work now in Costa Rica. I'm at a point where I might actually be moving because there's just been a lot of drama in the last 6 months where business has been attacked left, right, and center. So I'm kind of middle of a bit of chaos.
Mhm.
And then I accidentally started a fine dining restaurant in Costa Rica. I published, I think, myself 9 books and then contributed to 3 more. I've lost the count, but it's like around those numbers. Uh, Spoke at Harvard about entrepreneurship. So I love a lot of things. I'm someone who has so many interests. I love arts and dancing, and I make music, and I love science, and I'm a numbers person. So um,
Yeah.
I'm excited to have a conversation with
Let's
you because I saw on your website that you have so many interests, and that usually it's so hard to find someone who has such a broad range of interests and doesn't shy away from it because our society is so siloed into narrow, laser focused. I do only one thing, and so it was such a breath of fresh air to read your website and to be like, oh wow, this is very interesting.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I always joke that my niche is that I don't have one, which is very rare these days.
Yeah.
And especially in the Cameron Journal as a publication, we like to cover a wide variety of topics, most of whom I cover myself, some of which are filled in by contributors, like Dan in many cases and other wonderful people. And so, yes, I definitely appreciate that because everyone is, so very narrow and so specialized now. So, which I think in a weird way, in the age of AI, is probably going to bite a lot of people in the ass. Like, I think given AI, the future is for the non-specialist. Like being able to comprehend multiple fields and different things is going to be very handy. So, you
I
know,
agree.
yes. It's going to be Revenge of the Humanities majors, which is going to be rather entertaining.
I hope
Because
so.
yes, we've been taking it in the nose for 15, 20 years now, so it'll be nice.
Hmm.
The only upside of AI. So, since you mentioned how you accidentally started a restaurant, let's dive into the food review restaurant end of things. How does one accidentally start a restaurant?
Why? I guess that's
Because
the
it
story of
usually
my
takes a
life.
lot of money and intention.
Well, that's the story of my life. Most of the things I've done in my life were accidents. So I accidentally ended up in Costa Rica. I was working in New York, I had to leave the country to change my visa, or renew the visa. And so I left the country for 2 months. Uh, and I thought, well, where am I going to go? Didn't want to go back to Europe. So I thought Costa Rica, I'd heard of it. I was like, amazing. Came here for 2 months, fell in love with the place, and moved all my work online. And so I started like doing coaching work online with entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, helping them raise funds. And things were growing really well. The business started booming. And so I bought a plot of land and I thought I'm going to build a coaching retreat center. I was
Mm.
promised fast internet. Turned out the fast internet was no internet at all.
Mm.
And so I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I figured at the time that I solved the internet situation being in Costa Rica, I needed to occupy myself and do something. And my neighbor had lent me her tiny, tiny little casita. We're talking about, like 8 by 8 meters. So as little as it can be, little studio thing. And I thought I enjoy hosting dinner. I like cooking. I never worked in a restaurant, never been in culinary school, but I enjoy hosting dinner. If I have 4 or 6 people a night, once or twice a week, it'll be amazing. And I can do
Sure.
a set menu. If it's a set menu, then there's no surprise. I thought, how hard can it be?
Famous last words.
Hmm. Of course, the first dinner, I remember I started cooking around like 6 a.m. The clients arrive around 5. And the only break I got was to take a quick shower before they arrived. Didn't eat all day. Didn't do anything else except cook frantically, nonstop. And they arrived at 5. They left at 11:30. The dinner lasted 6.5 hours. Uh, and And by the end of the time that they left, the entire kitchen was dirty. And I had another 2, 3 hours of work. I remember sitting there at the little porch of that house and thinking, everyone was right. I'm an idiot. Uh, there's a reason this is a job. There's
Yeah.
no way it's going to work. And, little by little, things got better. People really liked it. And in my head, it was going to be like a month or two, the time I solved the internet thing. Then people started writing reviews and then on TripAdvisor. And then from one review to another, I became number one on TripAdvisor for the province. And then within 5 months, I got selected by Open Table as one of 25 dishes to travel around the world for. Um, and so the restaurant happened. Like people loved it. And so people were calling me and messaging me. And so there was no reason for me to keep looking for coaching clients or training work or consulting work because there was a flow of people.
Yeah.
And everyone liked it more than the previous one. And I kept receiving 5-star reviews. And 9 years later, I've got on TripAdvisor 181 reviews, 179 are 5-star, two or 4 stars, and the 0 3 star, 0 2 star, 0 1 star. So that's how it
No,
happened by accident.
no, I'm always amazed. No, I'm always amazed by um how that happens to people because my life doesn't happen that way at all. Nothing around here happens by accident. If something has occurred, it was a lot of work, a lot of difficulty, and great intention. So I'm always amazed at people who, live different lives where these wonderful things just kind of happen in weird ways.
I mean, it still happens with a lot of work and effort, and there's still intention. But I guess the intention is maybe broader,
Yeah,
and
maybe.
so
Yeah.
the intention is kind of like I need something to happen. I need something to work. Which is interestingly, I'm now right now as you're talking to me, I'm back in the same position I was 9 years ago because the business has been attacked dramatically. Uh, and basically, my online life was taken out. Facebook, Instagram, they managed to, the algorithm of TripAdvisor changed and I disappeared, even though my ratings haven't changed. I disappeared from TripAdvisor. I'm now number 148, and I've been trying to figure out from them why, if I haven't received any bad reviews. And they told me it
Yeah.
was proprietary information. And so basically, I'm at a stage where there's no more restaurant in the sense that there's nobody booking. And so I'm now trying to figure out how do I move to the next step. And so I'm back in that same place where I'm having a broad range of intention where it's like, I need something to work and I'm open to it being a restaurant, move to another country, going back to coaching and training, or whatever else life is happy to throw at me. I'll put in the hard work. And I guess that's kind of, so I hear what you're saying and I'm like, I think it's the same thing. It's just that I guess the universe hasn't been very linear with me. I've tried, but the universe does not want me to be linear. It keeps throwing me curveball every time I think now I'm on a path. And I thought this is my ninth year with the restaurant. I know. Finally, I'm doing something stable in my life. And then
Yeah.
boom, this happens. And it's like, well, I guess we're doing something else now.
I mean, there is a certain, I think there between, when you're going on an entrepreneurship path or a solo professional or all this type of thing, it is, it is very different. And the word stability means a very different thing than a more traditional job path situation.
Uh huh. Exactly. So
And I think
sometimes
that's
stability.
kind of what's maybe sometimes a little confusing for people.
Uh huh. And that's why I love the documentary. And I can't remember the name of the guy. It's a guy who was the best at walking on, like a thin little string between buildings.
Hmm.
Uh, and they walk with like a thing in their hand like that, and they kind of like. And he was saying how people tell him that he has amazing balance, and he says in the documentary that there is no such thing as balance. When he's on the string, it's going left, right, left, right, left, right. It's actually being always out of balance. But between out of balance between the 2 points, you find the equilibrium to go forward.
Yeah.
Um, and so that really resonated well with me because balance can be being in the center, but it can be the equilibrium between two moving opposites.
No, I think that there's definitely always different dynamics. I mean, pushing and pulling and at play and there's, and sometimes those are I find sometimes um your own stuff, your own journey. But then, like you talk about with your restaurant, it also can sometimes end up being stuff entirely out of your control. And as I
Mm-hmm.
always kind of tell people, the phrase survival of the fittest is what's in pop culture from Darwin. That's not actually what he said. It was survival of the most adaptable.
Yes.
And that's very different. Those who are able to adapt to new and changing situations, and this is true in the animal kingdom, all this sort of thing, will survive over those that are that can't adapt to different
Yeah.
shifting and changing situations. And so
Yeah.
that, yeah, I think that if there's kind of one thing I think to cultivate for people with an entrepreneurial mindset or whatever have you is adaptability, because things are going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. You know,
Yeah.
how you
Yes.
handle those things will define whether you're going to make it or not.
And especially in this day and age, and you're talking about the rise of AI, we're at a time where, yep, adaptability is more and more important. And that's why I love the quote by, I think, someone called Kussler, who said that literacy in the 21st century is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I feel it's very much what you were saying about AI. Like, today you've got to be able to relearn and learn, adapt to new things. There's a new AI tool, boom, it changes the game. You've got to figure out how to use this new tool, and then there's a new other thing, boom, you've got to adapt to this.
Yeah.
um, and so the old paradigm of you're going to go to university, get a job, and do the same thing for the next 50 years. I doubt that this is going to happen for many people starting now.
I mean, it was already kind of on its way out. Um, I think, my next book is called America's Lost Generation, and it tells the story of American millennials. Now the economy screwed us over. And one of the things I found in my research on that book was a lot of the trends that we have complained about and people have talked about um, over the last 15 years since 2008, um, how many of those things were kind of already niggling trends before. The real story starts in about 03, 04, and then the recession just sped them up. So companies were already not really hiring people with general degrees anymore. People were, the shifting nature of changing jobs multiple times was already starting to happen. you know, and if you were in a field in the 90s that had a lot of offshoring or layoffs or difficulties, the story was kind of already true for you. And so the recession just sped all of these trends up, as recessions tend to do. Whatever's trending gets sped up massively. The pandemic did the same thing. Um, and that, yeah, that's been, so I mean, literally we're almost 25 years in to this new thing. And I think, I mean, I agree, it's here and it's here to stay. But what would you say to people who, and I know I suffer from this as well, lacking that stability is incredibly stressful. I mean, let's just be honest. Having to shift and change what you're doing, your career, all this type of thing. And this kind of gets into some of your thoughts about identity and everything. Because for a lot of people, it is an identity shift, is incredibly stressful. In everything that you do and all the transitions that you have made in life and business, how do you deal with that stress and that lack of consistency? The you get up and you know what your day in your life is going to look like.
That's a good question. And I'm actually very happy you're asking me this question at this point, because usually I'm getting asked this question, I get interviews when I'm back up on the sort of
Right.
on the thing. And so when you're back at the top, the answer to this question is always very different, because when you're back at the top, it's like, well, look at me, things worked out. Just,
Right.
you just deal with it. And then, uh, while now it's very interesting, because now I'm in the middle of like the suffering. Now I'm in the suffering. Now I'm in that thing. You said suffer. I wrote it down and I was like, yes, it is. It is suffering, and it is stressful, um, and it is very unpleasant. Um, and I think that, to me, this is the first step of the process, is accepting that there is a part of suffering and discomfort and stress and tension and anxiety, and that all of that is not a bad thing. And it is not pleasant, and I don't want this to continue like it is right now. But I do recognize, from having gone through this cycle many times and having taken many clients through this cycle many times, that it's like the butterfly going into its cocoon. Like, it is that moment of transformation. The lobster, to change its shell, has got to go and hide under a rock, remove its protective shell, be helpless without defense, to rebuild a new one. And so there's always a level of discomfort, a level of fear, a level of removing the safety, if we want to be able to grow and make that massive change in ourselves. And recognizing that the suffering of it and the unpleasantness of it is part of the journey, and that, when we change the story around these things from this is a problem to this is the solution, and if this is happening, It's giving me um, indications and directions as to where I'm going,
Yeah.
and where is my internal drive compared clashing to the external circumstances. And the idea that this, it's like the alchemy, in order, in the idea of alchemy to create gold, like it happened through intense pressure. Diamonds transform from carbon because of pressure. So pressure is what creates change. And so it's transforming the story as to the suffering I'm feeling, the discomfort, the anxiety, all of this. How is this a source of the new reality? And where is this guiding me? Um, and so it's accepting it in a way. It's feeling it, and while feeling it, being like, where is this driving me? And so, yeah, in my case right now, this is the question I'm going through, which is the first thought is always, why is this happening to me?
Right.
Why now? Why me? This is unfair. And then it's working through, okay, well, now I've gone through the unfair phase of the process. Now I'm in the second phase, which is, okay, so what are the options out there? What have I not
Yeah.
considered? And now from there, we're starting to rebuild, and the suffering and the anxiety slowly decrease as the new reality rebuild itself.
Yeah, and I think that I think that is definitely a helpful idea to give people an understanding kind of what the process and what the cycle is. I want to talk about identity as well because for a lot of people, I think even myself included, a lot of our identity and who and how we think of ourselves gets tied up in a job, a business, a relationship, whatever have you. And when those things go, move, or change, even if it's a very positive thing, um, you kind of lose sight of who you are without that context. So in this moment where you're in this business transition, how are you maintaining your own sense of identity and self-worth in these difficult times?
And thank you. You're spot on because as you start talking, I wrote identity because I don't. This is very tied to that. So I'm glad you asked the question because this is part of the suffering. Is the lack of identity because we all need to know who we are. Who
Yeah,
am I so that I can present myself? And that's why when you asked me at the beginning, who are you? There was this moment where I was like, wait, fuck, who am I right now?
yeah,
I'm not a success. Like in my head right now, I'm not a successful person. Right now, I'm someone whose restaurant is about to go bankrupt because what the fuck is happening? And it's all gone to shit. And where I'm like, I'm someone who doesn't know whether I'm going to continue living in Costa Rica or move somewhere else. I don't know whether I'm still going to be a fine dining chef or whether I'm going back to being a coach or a consultant or a trainer or whether there's something different that I'm going to be doing. Um, and so it is soul crushing.
yeah,
And I think that one is a step. It is realizing that yes, my identity is dissipating itself. I don't know who I am anymore. And so it's time to rewrite a new narrative.
yeah.
It's the moment where we write a new narrative for ourselves. And interestingly, as I say this, I remember a video I saw a couple of days ago from a political thinker who was um, talking about what is the right offering that the left isn't. Why so many people, going in the right in terms of politics.
Mhm.
And what she was talking about, I was thinking what she was talking about is the fact that one of the things that Trump has been doing, one of the things the right is doing, is a message of the future.
Mhm.
We are going to make the future different. while the
Yeah.
left is more of a status quo message, which is we're trying to maintain things as they are so it doesn't. And so the right is creating a narrative for the future that gives hope to certain people. And
Well, and
so,
let's also face it, a lot of modern right wing politics, and not just in America, Argentina, um, Germany, France,
yeah,
the
everywhere.
right is oftentimes offering a very narrowly defined sense of identity that caters to a very narrow sense of people, you know.
People and with
Um,
and that identity has a present, a past, and a future, which
yes,
is we were great, everything sucks right now,
right.
and we're gonna be great again.
Yes.
And so we're going to remove this problem and we're going to go back to being amazing and things are going to be so good. And they they emphasize always that things are going to be great. Things are going to be amazing. Things are going to be so much better. And in a
Yes.
way, uh, even though that message is completely wrong, in my opinion, and I'm not like, but the technique they're using is working.
Mhm.
And it's that
Yes.
same technique that we need to do for ourselves when we're in those situations, which is how do I recreate a narrative of the future that is hopeful and that says things are going to be better in the future? Because my identity need to be tied to I'm working towards something being better. If my entire narrative if are things that keep going to get worse, then the suffering has no purpose. The struggle has no reason to be because it's just more and more and more suffering in a destructive way. Well, if we create a narrative where, well, there has to be a reason for this suffering.
Yeah.
What is the reason I can find? What am I learning from this stress? How am I becoming a new person who has a new identity that is, I dealt with this problem.
Yeah.
Now I'm a person who has managed to successfully deal with this problem and who has a different future. Um, and 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 it's something we do for ourselves, but I think it's also something we do in community, and that's why Dan has actually been very helpful in this process. We met just as things were starting to collapse, and
Yeah.
he's been there through the collapse, and he actually has been a part of maintaining a core to my identity. So giving me a space to talk about philosophy on his platform and personal development through the lens of philosophy has given me a kind of a core nucleus of like, well, I am that person. I am that person who writes those things.
No, no,
Um,
I think that that piece of trying to maintain yourself in the difficult times is prescient for everyone because, like, for example, one of the biggest things like new parents talk about is how hard it is with infants because the world revolves around them, as it totally should. But a lot, obviously you're not, used to that. We ask too much of parents. That's another discussion. But that is a very, it's an absolutely massive lifestyle change. And usually if someone comes along and claims it isn't, there's some, self-suffering, very tired and stressed out spouse, usually a woman behind the scenes who's making that possible for them. And it
exactly.
is absolutely massive. And I think it is, and I think it's really sad because a lot of tribal societies can do this. It's really sad we don't have really anymore a ritual for that, something to do for that, something that you do to kind of handle and manage that. I think that's also where the loss of community and raising children is very hard because you don't have a lot of help. And two very tired people is not enough to manage a baby who needs care every 2 hours, sort of thing. And one of the things that I think good but interesting is how popular it's become for people to move closer to family when they have kids in this country, because that's how families in previous generations got away with having 12 kids, sort of thing. They were not doing it all themselves. And they didn't watch their kids that much. They didn't pay attention to their children that much. But there's definitely all these sort of different contexts, and I think it's very easy to lose what you still have in the midst of a great transition. Just because one part of your life is falling apart doesn't mean your whole life is falling apart.
And this is part of, I think, one of the beautiful things as I'm sort of listening to you and hearing the feedback in my head. I'm like, yes, because when you lose your identity, it feels like you're losing everything. But like
Yeah.
we said, the job is not everything we are. And in the same way, I remember when, was it maybe a month ago, a month and a half ago, I discovered that the entire Facebook, Instagram, personal, professional, the restaurant was all gone with
Yeah.
no return. Um, I felt I'd lost all my contacts. I felt I'd lost everything,
Yeah.
and that felt real. And I was like, I have lost everything. I've got nothing now. I've got no more contacts. But
Right.
then I went back into my email. I was like, okay, I still have my email. So I started trying to pull all the contacts. I made a mass email to the 500 email I still had left saved because I don't really have people's email because all my contacts were on Facebook and Instagram. That
Right.
was the whole point of Facebook and Instagram. It was my address book of the 40
Yeah.
plus countries I've traveled, people from all over the world. I could message anyone anywhere and be like, hey, it, out of the 500 emails, I knew that probably most of them were not functional anymore. But I did
Yeah.
send to everyone an email. I received, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 replies. And every reply was like, oh, wait, I haven't lost everything. I haven't lost all my contacts. I've lost 99% of my contacts, but I still have some. And so the still have some is that moment of like creates the feeling of gratitude of like, well, I do still have a few people who care. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of the work identity, the identity, yeah, I've lost the work. I'm not this, I'm not that anymore. I'm not, but I'm still something. Like, and so it forces you to go back to the core of like, what am I still in the middle of all these crises, in the middle of like losing everything? What do I still have? Well, we still so far have food on the table. Uh, there's the fear that it's not going to be there because of the
Yeah.
situation, but the fear of it is not helping right now. So it's focusing on the great. Well, what do we have? We still have this. I'm having a conversation with you, and it's a blessing. And so it's
Yeah.
and so one can always choose the narrative we want, which is, well, I'm having a conversation with you, but what is this going to change? How is one conversation going to make a difference? And that increases my suffering and my anxiety and will close me to doing more. But if I say, hey, I'm having a conversation with you, this is the start. Maybe our conversation is not going to generate new business or new nothing, but maybe it'll generate a bit of energy in me and positivity, which it is, and it's gonna give me the energy to, after our call, do a little bit more work, message a few more people. Who knows? Maybe someone who listens will be like, "Hey, I want to connect and do something." And this idea that there's a narrative of like every step I take is gonna open a door. It's gonna open a new door. And if I keep
Yeah.
opening doors, there's a point where I'm gonna open a door and there's gonna be a friendly face. And here you are, being one of those friendly faces, being like, "Hey, I'll talk with you. I'll give you visibility
Yeah.
when nobody else wants." And so that's kind of where we find our allies and we rebuild a community. To go back to what you were talking at the beginning, we have to rebuild a community within the problems and the anxiety, and building a community that focuses on how do we build together? What how do we add value to each other rather than, oh, let's suffer all together.
Oh no, and I actually I want to turn to that towards the end. So people don't know this, but you've contributed to two growth hacking books.
Mm-hmm.
And as some the show is in a very interesting place. We're recording this on the 28th of April. 2025, which is why I'm a little bit slow in this recording because it was my birthday last weekend and I'm in recovery today. And so but the show is in a very interesting place. Later this afternoon, I'm going to interview Paul Greenberg, who is a National Geographic contributor. And he wrote a book called The Climate Diet that was very famous. He's multiple New York Times bestselling author, all this sort of thing. And numbers wise, this show is starting to what I call break containment. We're starting to get a lot more public awareness and everything. And so it's in a very interesting place of we're getting more successful, but we're not quite across the line. We're kind of at that last, like, tenth of a mile sort of thing. Yeah. And so, in all your contributions to these two growth hacking books, what is your advice for someone who is on the cusp of breaking through, asking for a friend? I'm the
Oh, great.
friend.
What's the advice? I guess the question needs to be. Let me flip back the question. What is it you want to be different from what it is now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I would like to add, at least one or two zeros to every social media account following, and also, have this make more money in a more sustainable way. That's, people don't realize with content creators, it's a small minority that ever actually make money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Most don't because of how platforms use our content and don't pay us for it. And so it's incredibly difficult to do. I'm blessed that I have other skills and this what I do is also a skill that can be sold. So I've been spending the last about year and a half or so working on building a consulting business. Hasn't gone well yet, but we're still working on it. But the Cameron Journal, as far as it goes, we're finally breaking containment. We're finally, generating a good amount of views, especially in short video, and a good amount of web traffic. And we're attracting a very sophisticated level of guest on the podcast side and all this type of thing. And so there's a lot of people who, at this point, out of exhaustion, both physical and financial, would kind of give up and quit and be like, yeah, I got almost there. But if you're in that last tenth of a mile, 2/10 of a mile of, a race to getting across the line, how do you get through the end where you at least get across to, that next stage of success?
Thank you. So I'm listening to you and I'm hearing that there's really two things. One is to add one or two zeros to the social media account, and the other one is creating money in a more sustainable way. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So at this stage, I would say the first question is how are these two things the same thing? And then how are these two things different?
Yeah. Well, I think they're similar in that they both require a certain amount of attention. That's kind of the thing they have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they're also different in that I think one is somewhat easier to achieve than the other.
Okay, which one?
I think the social media following is easier than the money. A click is cheaper than $1. A click is free. Money costs money. So,
One is easier. So it's easier to add zeros to social media than to create money in a sustainable way.
always, yes, always. Because a click is
Oh,
free. Money is money.
well, okay. So um, what if it was the other way around? Now, if you
Yeah.
had the narrative that making money is easier than getting clicks, what difference would that make for you?
Um, mm, not terribly. It's kind of six of one, half dozen of another sort of thing. I mean, obviously, money is nicer than clicks. can't pay the rent with clicks, you know. But obviously one of those is, more helpful to life than the other one. That's probably the big difference. But I mean, either way, it's still kind of, the same. In an attention economy, attention is dollars and dollars are attention sort of thing. They're kind of given how things work now, those things are kind of inextricably linked. I remember I was speaking to this consultant for consultants. And I described all that I was doing in the programs that I had put together and all this sort of thing. And he said, I think you forgot one crucial step in all this. And I said, what's that? And he said, you forgot to become famous first. And that's when I kind of realized, like, oh yeah, this in an attention economy, this stuff has more value and more weight when there's more attention on it. And interestingly enough, in the probably years since I've had that conversation, the attention has started to come in. I'm really kind of breaking through containment. We're starting to get some new interesting people, more people are interacting, all this sort of thing. And this show has been around in some form for 10 years. This has not been an overnight success, not even close. But it's just an interesting sort of thing. But I also think people would find what I do personally and the type of research I offer very valuable without necessarily having a huge social media following. So I kind of understand where your thought process is with that.
And this is following. And this is something that at least I saw for myself. Ironically, I was making more money when I had less social media followers.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean,
my social
there's
media
some
grew
really
a
great
lot.
people doing wonderful business that have a handful of connections on LinkedIn. They've never opened Facebook and they have, no real public name, but everybody who needs to know them knows who they are, sort of thing,
Yeah. And from what I see, a vast majority of creators who have social media accounts with hundreds of thousands or sometimes millions of followers make no money
Oh yeah.
because they have all the attention, but they don't have the conversion. And so, um, one of the things that I would do in your case is to start shifting the narrative you have, because the narrative you have is clicks are cheaper than money. It's easier to get views than to get money. Now, the brain has what is called confirmation bias. So when we believe something, we look for proofs to confirm what we believe.
Right.
And so if you start telling yourself and having a mantra and writing in front of your computer, different places in your house, it's easier to get money than clicks. And you start telling yourself, well, it is easier to make money than to get views. You're going to start looking for the confirmation that this is true.
Mm.
And so I would get that as like, without knowing more about your business strategy, because we could dive in and I would love to dive in further and I would happily have with you, actually, if it's of interest, I would happily have with you a full coaching conversation recorded live like this, if that's of interest, to try to go through this process of really sort of taking an hour and a half to 2 hours to dive into your world and figure out what are all the different things. But from a sort of general, I know
Yeah.
very little. I would say that first sort of belief paradigm shift is going to make a difference. Now, I don't know what this is going to do for you, but I know that if you keep telling yourself making money is easier than getting views, and look how many views I'm getting, and look how fast my views are growing,
Right.
then my money needs to be growing faster than this. So now it's like, okay, it's easier to make this money. How is it easier? And then from that belief, it becomes, how is it easier for me to make money than getting followers?
Yeah.
And now we started to answer, because the brain, AI, what I love about AI is that it is inspired by a Jewish joke. From when I was a kid, there was this joke that said, God created man in his image, and to thank him, man created God in his image.
Yeah.
And so, with AI, I often find that we created AI in our image.
Yes.
We complain about all the things AI does badly. And I'm like, well, it seems that everything AI does badly is a mirror of what humans do badly. And actually,
Yes.
it's built in our image. And so, what AI is really good at is answering questions. That's what AI does. And that's what our brain does. Our brain is designed to answer questions. And so, whatever question we throw at the brain, it will find answer. If my question is, why do people not like me? I can spend the rest of my life coming up with answers as to why people don't like me and why people hate me and why my business is never going to work and why things are not going to work. I can have an endless list of that. But that list is not going to be as helpful, even though it has some help. And I think the exercise is useful because it helps us see what the potential problems are. But much more helpful is, why is this going to work? Why does this have to work? How is this going to work? And now the brain goes into that direction as to figuring out, how is it easier? Because for some people it is.
Yeah.
And so that might also be starting to associate yourself with a community of people who make more money than they have listeners.
Yeah.
And you might be
No, I think that's
inviting an
a good
interview.
idea.
People starting today say, you know what? You're going to make one interview every so and so with someone who makes more money than they have followers. And be like, what's the deal with you? How you don't have
Yeah.
followers? How do you make this money? What are you doing that I'm not doing? And back to that question. Um, and so that would be kind of my general direction. And then the other little thing that the little bottle I would throw in the ocean for you is, talk to your listeners. I don't know if what the interaction you have with your listeners, but right now, from what I understand, your listeners are your biggest asset. What you've built is
Yeah.
the value you've built, the investment you made is within your listeners. That's where you've invested your time, efforts, and energy and attention and intention. And so those followers, I would also maybe shift the narrative. I don't know what is the narrative you have right now, but one of the narratives that I would add is, my followers know where the money is.
Hmm.
One of my
Yeah. Yeah.
followers knows where the money is. And then it's figuring out how to talk to your listeners, how to have a conversation with them about, what do they think of your show? What is the value they get from your show? And that's a question I would love as a sort of coach consultant, to ask, what is the value that your listeners get from your show? Like, really? Because they listen, they come in and you say that it's growing. So there's more and more people who see value.
Yeah.
What did they really gain at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the year? You've been going for 10 years. Do you have some listeners that have been following you for 10 years? If so, who are these people?
Yeah.
And why do they listen to you and not to someone else? Why is it that they like your content? And so by having these conversations, you're building your own story and your own identity. Oh, whoa. Oh, that's the value add, people. And now you know what that value is, core, like intrinsically, because they're the people they're your community, they're your tribe.
No. I think that's excellent. Getting more interaction from more of a community building mindset is definitely on my list for 2025. For a long time, it's been a very kind of passive interaction, and the bulk of what I do is news politics, but I also do author interviews, which sometimes gets into news politics, sometimes not. Um, And so the listenership is very diverse and all this sort of thing. And I've started to finally really press on bringing people together, building community. I partnered with other shows and we're doing that and having great panel discussions like I did last week with David Beckham at Outrage Overload and all this type of thing. So yeah, I think that's a Yeah, that's good food. That is good food for thought. But I think also the greater point of if you are working on a project in business, all this type of thing, these are the type of questions, you know, to ask yourself at certain junctures. So yeah,
Mhm.
excellent, excellent,
And
perfect.
keep
Well,
going back to asking the question because
yeah,
I'm in a way going back to asking myself the same question, which is, and one of the question I'm asking myself right now is, who wants to pay me money? Who has money that they're waiting to give me because they need something from me?
yeah,
Who's the person who needs my help, wants my help, and has money to pay me, and they just don't know yet that I'm here to help them?
yeah,
And that's the way that I'm thinking of the question. And so now I'm looking, and now I'm opening the doors and be like, I'm recreating that belief that there is someone out there who wants to pay me for something. And I don't know them yet, maybe, or they don't. Maybe we know each other, and it's figuring out who is that person who's been waiting to meet me because there's something I can offer them. And so creating that narrative shifts the perspective. And the thing about talking to listeners that I'm now thinking about the fine dining restaurants, one of the successes for me, and one of the things that has made the restaurant so good is that I'm everything at the restaurant. So I'm the waitress, I'm the chef, I'm the marketing person, I talk to the clients. And so I bring the food out to people and I take the plates away.
yeah,
And I discovered that how important it is for me to take the plates away because there's 10 people in a table, at the restaurant, 12 people. I see that 6 people left one element on one of the plates. So what I do is 7 course meal. And each course has like 4 or 5 elements into it. I see 6 people leave something on the plate, and I'm like, what happened? And invariably they're like, oh, no, nothing, everything's great. I'm like, 6 out of the 12 left that thing on the plate. What was wrong
okay,
with it? And at first people are like, no, 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 it was great. I'm like, well, these 6 people believe it was great, but you don't think it's great. And it would be very helpful for me to know what was wrong. Was it too salty? Was it too cooked? Was it not? And then suddenly people start being like, well, the texture of that thing, I didn't really like it. And then the other one's like, oh, well, it was too much like this, it was too much like that. And now the other side of the table is like, well, no, I really like the texture. Or, no, I agree with them. The texture wasn't great, but I love the flavor. And doing that every single night that I have a dinner, I know what people think of what I cook.
yeah,
And so I know because they're telling me. And so when I cook, I don't cook blind. I'm cooking knowing that I've had 9 years of people telling me we like it like this, we don't like it like that. And so I even know the statistics more or less,
yeah,
that there's certain things that more or less 50% of the people are going to love it, 50% are not going to like it.
yeah,
Most likely people who like dish are going to like this other dish also, but they're not going to like the other one. But those people who like dish number 3 will also like dish number 7. And so I'm starting to learn the pattern, listening to the people who give me the money. And in this case, the people who are your community have so much knowledge about you that you don't have about yourself because they see and hear things that you take for granted. And you're like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Like, no, but there's that thing you do and say that's just mind blowing. And you might not be realizing that you're putting so much effort into something else. And there's actually this thing you do here that for you is like, yeah, sure, whatever. I just do that.
yeah,
And they're like, no, this is the thing. And that's what happens to me at the restaurant. Most of the favorite stuff are things that I thought that I was not going to put on the plate. I was like, this is not great, but I don't have anything else. It's okay enough. I hope people don't complain. And people are like, this is the best thing I've had. And I'm like, really? And I find the same when I was doing photography. When I had art exhibitions, photography exhibitions, I would print 20 photos and my 5 favorites. and my 5 that were the least favorite, that were like, the 5 to kind of get to 20.
Yeah.
Almost invariably, the one that sold the most was the one that I was not gonna put onto the thing. The one I like the most, nobody cares.
No, we're at the top of the hour and we have to close, but I had this moment last week. Every Monday I do a live news hour, and it's live on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and all these different platforms. And last week I was tired. I was not feeling it. We had a lot of news to cover. I went 20 minutes over. It was almost an hour and a half. I came out of it. It didn't feel good. I was glad it was over. My friend, who I've known since 2012, called me and said, I think this was the best one you've ever done. And I'm kind of like, how? I didn't like it going into it. I didn't like it coming out of it. We had a ton of new stories to cover. It didn't feel good. I was just glad it was over. I'm sort of thing, but he absolutely thought it was the best one ever. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay. So no, I definitely have recently had that moment. Absolutely.
And so, if I can bring this back to the very first thing we did, would you say that episode is one of the ones during which you suffered the most? It was the most stressful and tense, and
definitely, because I really wasn't into it. It was a lot to cover. I was really tired. It was been a long day, and I don't do the news hour till 7 o'clock in the evening. And so I was just kind of like, oh my God, I just want to kind of get through this sort of thing as fast as, yeah. And so it was.
So you didn't enjoy it. You did not enjoy this. This was not fun for you. And so going back to the very beginning of the conversation about the suffering, what your friend said was your best ever.
Yeah.
Is one of the ones you did not like doing because it was stressful. It was like intense. You were tired and all these things. But something great came out of it.
Yes.
And that's kind of that narrative that I want to bring back to people. Like, yes, they were suffering. Yes, it was. I mean, you ideally wouldn't repeat that circumstances.
True. Yes.
Right? You'd much rather have it relaxed. But that was really good. And so now the question is going back to that. What happened in that episode that made it so good? And how do you repeat that?
Yes. Absolutely.
Without the stress and the suffering and the anxiety and the tiredness and like, so how can you repeat that, removing the suffering element?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a direction. That's interesting. But all right, we're at an hour. We're already over. So let's do this. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This is the part when we do plugs. So let us know where we can keep up with you and find you online, and we'll go from there.
The best place to find me is Here with Mercy, HIR with mercy.com. And there you can find everything I do, my entire, hopefully they don't take it down. But so far, that's where you can find me. You can find the coaching programs that I do. You can contact me through there for the fine dining. You can see the list of my books. And yeah, anyone who listens to this and think that they would like a conversation where I ask them questions and we talk about the change they want to make in their life, the thing they want to be different, whether it's professional or personal, I'll very happy have a conversation with them. So if you reach me out because you listen to this show, please write a note saying that you listened to me on the Cameron Show, and that way I know and we can create a connection with Cameron.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you so much.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you.